Hi, I'm Shauna J. Cerniak, founder of Every Woman Empowered, and alongside are my co-hosts,
Johnny Gallardo, international artist, and Every Woman Empowered resident artist.
And Mila Janu, certified laughter yoga instructor, founder of Let's Laugh Yig, and happiness ambassador for Every Woman Empowered.
Welcome to
Chit Chat!
And in honor of Indigenous Month, please help me welcome Elaine Alec, author and entrepreneur, and her book is called Calling My Spirit Back. Welcome, Elaine. Thank you for coming on to the show today.
Hi, great to be here.
Well, we truly appreciate it. And in honor of Indigenous Month, we have a lot of profound questions. I know that you have your own story, your own background is quite amazing. Your book is quite a powerful book, and I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about you and share with our viewers all about what you are doing to make a difference in your world. So thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Elaine, my first question is, your company, Alderhill Planning, put out this special memo to your partners and colleagues that you're giving them time to grieve and to move deadlines in order to focus on individual wellness. How would you encourage other businesses to decolonize and adopt these sort of practices?
Well, when we started talking about building our company, we knew that we wanted to decolonize it from the very beginning, and we knew that the very center of everything that we built had to be around wellness and well-being. And we also knew that the way that we worked with other groups and organizations, communities, nations, and governments were the same practices that we had to take into the way that we worked internally. And so that a few of those things that we promote are, we promote well-being of mind, body, and spirit. We promote inclusion, and that means inclusion of all perspectives and ideas, even the people that you don't like, and even the people that you don't agree with. Promoting freedom, freedom of choice in the way we participate in the work that we do, and promoting validation. And so validating people's feelings and experiences, even if we don't understand them. So even if I don't understand why something is really upsetting, that doesn't mean it's not valid. And so, you know, when this happens, you know, we deal with a lot of triggering and traumatic conversations in the work that we do. We do a lot of work around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, 2S LGBTQIA+. And we also work with a lot of elders and youth that have experienced multi-generational and intergenerational trauma from residential schools. And we've managed to work through it, you know, backing each other up when one of us has a rough day, or we're triggered. We have team members we can rely on, and we check in with each other every Monday. It's a Monday mental health check-in. And so we do team check-ins, and it's not about what work do we have this week. Like, we do talk about that, but we always ask, what's on your heart? How are you feeling? You know, what's going on in your life? Is there anything that might impact you this week that might prevent you from showing up to be your best? And if so, do you need backup and support? And so we're constantly taking those roles of stepping in for each other when we need extra help. And that's built a culture of support and love and healing and trust within our team. So when this announcement came out a couple of weeks ago from Penticton to Secwepemc, we knew we needed to tell our staff that it was a time to be gentle with ourselves, but it was easy to say. Like, it's easy to say from a management position or a boss to tell your staff, take care of yourself, but there's still work that's going to need to be done because we have clients and contracts.
Right.
And so in order for us to truly honor that, we needed to communicate that message with our clients and with our colleagues and our partners, many of them which are with the provincial and federal governments. And so we sent a letter out to them acknowledging what had happened, who we were, and we asked for an extension of a week to postpone events and any deadlines that we had coming up. And we also asked them to share that message across their ministries and with their colleagues. So anybody working with Indigenous employees and colleagues knew that this might be happening and that this was a good time for our allies to step in to take on some of those, tasks that we didn't necessarily need to be a part of, but some of those little tasks that might need to be done so that things don't fall to the side.
Mhm.
So I did a free vicarious trauma and resiliency section for people. We had 70 people show up. About 50 of them were government representatives, and really encouraged and challenged them to go back and take a look at their existing funding agreements, contracts, deadlines, and understanding that once we postpone and extend deadlines, it's going to be a domino effect. And so to kind of take a look at some of those things that might impact our communities, because we don't have the time to grieve, because we're constantly responding. And when we don't have the time to grieve, it impacts the way we make decisions and the way we work. And it is completely unfair for people to put that pressure on us, to expect us to show up and make really important decisions about our people and our lives when we're under that kind of position. So that was a big question, a big answer, but I'm so grateful that you asked it.
Oh, and thank you for that. I think a lot of people can take so much out, from that answer. And like you said, it's one thing to say it, but to actually act on it. And I'm so happy to hear that your team came together and were able to support each other in that way. My next question, I saw you said that sometimes you want to hide away and live this simple life working in a hotel. And I can definitely relate. There's definitely times I've had fantasies about working simpler jobs, like when things are really stressful. But then you also said what draws you back is being reminded that you'll never have that privilege of a simple life. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I think anybody that is born into a minority group, we will never have that privilege of just living a simple life with blinders on. There is nothing that happens in this world. There are absolutely no decisions, no laws, no rules and policies in this, especially in this country, that would allow us to have the privilege of not doing anything. Canada, I believe, is the Indian Act is the only racist legislation in the world. And there are so many policies that work against us. So it doesn't matter what people say, politically, to say they're supporting change, that it's not the truth if we're not on the ground doing the work to change those things that are killing our people, that are promoting sickness and death, promoting exclusion, promoting oppression, promoting shame. And so many of the existing systems do that. And I don't have the luxury or the privilege to not do anything because of what I know. Once you know something, you can't just sit there and not do anything about it. Once you know what's going on, and that's why, what has happened in the last few weeks has opened the eyes of so many people, because you can't undo what you know now. So many people believed that, they made excuses like, it wasn't that bad, or, they were just kids, what do they remember? And they never really heard the stories. Like, if you haven't sat in a circle in an uncensored circle with residential school survivors, you will never understand the depth of the horrors of what happened in those schools. And so for our people who've sat in those circles with our elders, our parents, our grandparents, we knew, and it wasn't a surprise. But for so many people it was. And now it's something that you can't unhear, you can't unknow. And it's an opportunity for people to really stand up and start challenging the systems that harm and do damage to Indigenous people. And so, I have to do this work because of how I have to do this work because of how I was raised. And that is based on what I was told by our leadership, which is the work that we do not accomplish in our lifetime will be left for our children. And so what I do not accomplish in my lifetime will be left for my children. And I do not want my children to grow up the way that I did. And the way I grew up is better than the way my parents grew up, and so on.
100%. Yeah, you quoted a quote from your book, "You cannot change or heal what you do not acknowledge." And I think that's exactly what you're saying there. So, what are you reading right now?
I'm reading a few books. So I have one book by Caitlin Curtis. She is from the United States, and her book is called Native. And I also have a book that I'm reading, All My Relations. And I just finished listening to the audiobook for Jessie Thistle's, oh my gosh, Out of the Ashes.
The Métis. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I get gifted a lot of books now. So people send me books as gifts. So I've got a big book pile of books I'm slowly trying to get through. And then I also recently also started another book called Think Indigenous, which was just recently published as well.
That's some good reading material there.
Yeah, a lot of really good.
And it's wonderful that a lot of them are being gifted, that what goes around comes around too, right? So it's wonderful. I just got to say thank you for being so honest and open with us today, because I think it's really important. Multi-generational trauma has destroyed so many Indigenous families. What are your thoughts on what we can do to change part of that may be something you haven't talked about yet?
That's a big question.
It is a big one. Maybe small steps.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I always quote my husband. My husband asked me when I'm going to write a book about everything he says, because I quote him so much. He's like one of the people that I'm constantly talking to about everything that's going on, and he's brilliant. But one of the things he said that I always say is that the biggest mistake that Canadians can make is focusing on the healing of Indigenous people. Indigenous peoples do not need to be fixed or healed. I think right away people want to know, like, what can we do to help? What can we do to help you? What can we do to fix you? What can we do to contribute to your communities? How can we help you? Because we think you're the ones with the problem. And that may not necessarily mean what they're thinking, but that's how it comes across from our side. So, it's always the pressure is always on us to do the healing. And that's the biggest mistake we can make, because, we're changing the way that our children have grown up. My oldest son knows what it's like to grow up with an actively alcoholic mother. But my two youngest have never seen me drunk, and by the grace of the Creator will never see me drunk. And they're growing up with love, and they're growing up with support and consistency. They're growing up with parents and families who love them, and take them out on the land and do things with them, teaching them about how to, our stories about how to be good human beings, what their role is on the land and how to take care of it. And we can do that healing within our family. We are actively doing that in our family to break that multi-generational, to break that intergenerational trauma. But they still go into the world. They still go to school. They're still going to the store. They're still, interacting with people from many different backgrounds who don't have that same sense of healing and foundation of identity and belonging. And that's the issue, is that so many non-Indigenous people, so many allies and settlers have not recognized their own trauma, their own intergenerational and multi-generational trauma about being disconnected from their lands, their people, their sense of belonging and their identity. If you ask a majority of Canadians who they are and who they belong to, many of them can't give you an answer. And that is something that, if you read enough research and if you read enough about sense of identity, the importance of that sense of identity and belonging and how it contributes to people and how they behave and act in the world. I was raised by language speakers and storytellers. And when I experienced racism at age 5 and went home crying to my mother and my grandmother, they said, feel sorry for them. The reason why they're acting like that is because they don't know who they are. They don't have a land, they don't have a people that they come from, and you don't know what's going on in their homes. And so, when people were racist to me as a little child, I was told to feel sorry for them, because that need to behave in that way and to try to strip power from somebody else because of who they are and what their identity is a reflection of themselves. And so this deeply rooted racism that we have in Canada won't ever be fixed or won't ever be changed unless we honestly start finding ways to support, people and finding out who they are and what their identity is and going through their own motions of healing and their own intergenerational, so that they have a sense of belonging, they have a sense of identity, and they won't try to take that away from anybody else. And they will love themselves, and when they love themselves, they'll be able to love others. And so we as Indigenous people have those tools. We're doing that healing. We're bringing our families back together. We know what we need to do, but the change, the real support that's going to happen is going to be, from our allies, and having those difficult conversations within their families and their people and the people that they know, and providing that support. And I was asked a similar question about that, like what this one individual could do to make things better. And I told her to focus on her children, focus on your children, because how your children behave is going to impact the way my child grows up. And so people think that there's this great big, all of these big things, and they think it's overly complicated, and there's so many, things that we have to address to, because when you look at systemic issues, it seems really overwhelming. But if you look at any inspirational speaker or any inspirational philosophy, it all comes back to the individual. And when you look at nested systems and what made people powerful, what made villages and dynasties and those ancient ways powerful, were those nested systems that were rooted with the child at the center, with the individual at the center. And so, we can do all of this work in the world to try to fix family, try to fix community, try to fix nation and government. But none of that will matter and none of that will change unless we're doing the hard work, which is focusing on ourselves. And people don't want to do it. They do not want to do the inner work.
You're right.
They'd rather focus on everybody else than doing something else.
So much easier to clean someone else's dishes than your own.
Yes. My mom always had the analogy. She says, you can point your finger at somebody and say, hey, you need to work on yourself. But she says, remember, there's 3 more fingers and they're all pointing back at you. So focus on yourself before you start telling others what they need to work on. And I think that's the key that you know, Elaine, what you're saying is it's going back, working on ourselves. And when we work on ourselves, and we start to create that ripple effect, it starts to affect others. Others start to see what you're doing and the work that you're doing, and then they wanna work on themselves. And you know, I'm so glad that you said it's, you know, what can we do to help? What can we do to help? But just work on you and work on your, you know, the racist beliefs that you may have had, or the assuming. You know, so many times people assume or close their eyes or didn't take the time to learn. And if not now, I don't know when we should be really diving in and taking that time to understand, and not just the Indigenous culture, but Canada in a whole, and how it got to this point and where did things go wrong.
From the start, really.
Pardon me?
From the start, really, the Indian Act was one of the first legislation.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of people say, well, how can I learn? How can I learn more? I say, take the Corsica, the University of Alberta course on Native Studies, and it's, you know, Indigenous Studies, and it's amazing. And even for my own self, you know, yes, I knew a lot of history, but I learned so much from just taking that course, and it's free. So, you know, get out there and learn, take that time.
We really truly have no excuses.
No.
It always starts with us first. And you're right about it being, you know, what do they say? It takes a village to raise a child. And it's very important. So I'm going to kind of take us a different direction. I want to know, when did you know you were a writer, and do you journal?
I knew I was a writer really young, and I talk about it all the time. The first time my teacher told me that I was a writer, she said I was a good writer and I should become an author. I was 10 years old, and I remember my mom. I was 10 years old when my mom got sober. And so my mom started being around and being more active. And I remember whenever I would struggle with something or I would be overwhelmed, my mom always told me, just write it out. Just write it out, you know, write it out, see how you feel. And then afterwards, if you want to burn it, or if you want to share it. But just, and if you still feel stressed after you write it down, you know, then we'll talk it through again. But she always, you know, there's so many teachings that I'm learning about my mom and my grandmother as I'm getting older and sharing stories like this. But those teachings, those very simple teachings, were teachings to be self-determined, to be a self-determining human being, that I had all the answers for myself, that no one could tell me the answers. It always had to come from within me. And so I journaled and I wrote poems, and I used to love taking paper and pens and going and hiking up in the hills behind our house, or going to the water. Like, I always had this like vision of like peacefulness and comfort and inspiration, going out onto the land, going to the water, and just writing and listening to nothing, you know. And so I always wanted to be a writer. My mom told me I shouldn't be a writer. She said writers don't make enough money. You need to make money, and you know, all writers
Like artists.
starving artists.
About artists.
Yeah, and so I always wanted to be a writer. I had a goal. I said, one day I'm going to write a book. And when I was younger, I said, when I'm 35 years old, I'm going to have my first book published. And then 35 came and went, and 36 came and went, and 37 came and went, and 38 came and went, and it kept coming and going. And I kept thinking, is this gonna happen? Oh, I can probably let it go. Like, it's probably not gonna happen. I've tried so many times to write this book, and it's never, you know, I just haven't been able to do it. Maybe I'm not a writer. And so I just let it go. And then so much happened in 2019 for me. And so many things happened in 2019. But one of the biggest things that happened was I traveled across British Columbia talking to individuals about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And that I no longer knew that I no longer wanted to write the book. I now felt I had a sense of obligation to write the book. And so that is what changed the whole experience. And I locked myself in a room for 29 days and wrote my first draft. And that's when I, you know, and then even as you're writing, there's a thing called the marathon of the middle, where people will usually quit because it's like they start, it's just too much of them, too much of, you know, on and on and on and on. And like, is anybody going to read this? Is this even making sense? This doesn't, you know, this isn't interesting at all. Now I'm just starting to blabber. I obviously don't have enough to make a book. And so all of those things happened, and I was prepared for that. So I pushed myself through it to get to the end. And then even afterwards, I was thinking, well, maybe I'll just go print it off at Staples and hand it out at my sessions, and, you know, when I facilitate, and give it to a few people, and that'll be it. And then I sent it to Tellwell, which is a self-publishing company, and I asked them for an editorial evaluation. And I thought, we'll see what, I'll get this editorial evaluation, I'll see what they say, and then we'll go from there. And when I received the feedback from that, it was kind of like that first, like, oh, this is really good writing. This is a really important book. This is something that people want to read. And so it was like the next step. And I kept, you know, looking for that validation. And now that I'm, you know, in this for a little over a year now, it hasn't even been a full year since my book has been published, but I've been in a lot of writing groups with people now, and other authors and aspiring authors. And every single writer has asked a question in the group: how do I know my writing's good enough? Like, the most amazing writers in the world will say they said the same thing. How do I know my writing's good enough? And so, you know, one of my inspirations was Dr. Lee Miracle, who wrote the book Raven Song and I Am Woman. And when I used to ask her for advice, she wouldn't say anything. She would say one thing. She would say, writer's right. And that was it. And then, you know, I would get so frustrated. Well, obviously I'm not a writer then. But I've known my entire life that it was like the one thing I always knew. I always knew I wanted to be a writer, and I always kind of knew that it would be kind of a big deal, you know, for me, that would be a really important part of my life. I've known that since I was a child. So it's very, I get very emotional almost on a weekly basis when I think about where I'm at now, and the people I've been able to speak to and reach and hear from. And I get so many messages from people and emails and like inboxes. I have a hard time keeping up sometime, and I had to hire a personal assistant to help me with everything. And it's just, and I go through everyone. Like I actually really go through and read like every single one, and I have to respond to them personally. And I try to go through all my messages because I want people to know how important it is to me. Like it's them, that support, that keeps me going on days that I have set. Like I talked about it on my Instagram. Like I had a really, really rough week, and it was I had so many beautiful messages that got me through it. Like I'm so overwhelmed with emotion and gratitude for every person that reached out to give me medicine.
It's a good feeling when you have people reaching out to you when you're needing it the most. I can't believe that we're at an end here already, and time just flies. Before we leave, can you share with the audience about June 21st and what you have going on, and as well how people can reach you?
Sure. So on National Indigenous Peoples Day, which is June 21st, I'm hosting a 1.5-hour session called Storytelling Prophecies and Policy Change. And I'll be sharing a lot of stories and prophecies that I've heard over the years, and how they can contribute to changing policies, especially today and what's happening right now, and what people are willing to look at. So that's on June 21st, and it is at 11 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And you can register through my website, www.elainealec.com. And I've opened it up so people can get free tickets if they want, or they can give a donation. You can register through Eventbrite.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Elaine, for that. And people can reach you on Instagram, your website. You're also on Facebook as well?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much with us today. I mean, we could probably sit here and keep talking. There's so many topics and stuff that we wanted to discuss, and unfortunately, with only a short period of time. But we'd love to maybe have you come back on the show again, where we can reach out and share some more information. So thank you for being a part of our show, being a part of Chit Chat. And for those, again, June 21st, you definitely check it out. Go to elainealec.com, and that's ELAINEALEC.com. Thank you for watching, and have a beautiful day. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you.
Thank you.